Hello once again, and Tony here. Yes, I know it's 4 days before Thanksgiving, but as my early Thanksgiving gift to all of you guys, here's my review of the British horror comedy film Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny and Girly, which was released in the United Kingdom on February 12, 1970. It was also released in the United States as Girly, but I'll get to that later. The director was Freddie Francis, the producer was Ronald J. Kahn, the screenwriter was Brian Comport. It was based on the play written by Maisie Moscow entitled Happy Family. The cinematographer was David Muir. It was edited by Tristan Cones. The music was composed by Bernard Ebbinghaus, and it starred the talents of Ursula Howells, Pat Haywood, Vanessa Howard, Howard Trevor, Michael Bryant, Robert Swan, Imogen Hassel, Hugh Armstrong, and Michael Ripper. My experience with this film was mostly through chance, as I caught a trailer on YouTube and it caught my attention immediately. It wasn't until that I saw the film in its entirety and also learned a little bit about its history did I get so intrigued with this film. This film in particular had a very interesting piece of history. It initially had a lot of bad reception in its native United Kingdom. For example, in one of the opening scenes, we have Sonny who gives candy to Girly, and Girly proceeds to suck on Sonny's pointer finger to suggest that there is something incestuous between both Sonny and Girly. And there were also some other scenes that just didn't really sit well with viewers at the time. It wasn't until this film was released in the United States did it become a cult classic, mostly due to the boom of exploitation films. And it also had the tagline for Vanessa Howard as Girly, that Girly takes off where Baby Jane left off, and another tagline stating that everyone's dying to meet Girly. So this film also became a vehicle for Vanessa Howard, who portrayed our titular Girly. And it achieved cult status despite its poor reception in the United Kingdom, and especially in terms of its poor box office performance. But despite that, viewers could definitely enjoy this cult classic, and me personally, I enjoyed this film in terms of just how fun it was in a very dark and very interesting way. Now, going into the story, this basically tells the tale of four individuals: Mumsy, the matriarch; Nanny, the nanny and the caretaker; Sonny, the son of Mumsy; and Girly, the daughter of Mumsy. And they live on a set of rules which they have to abide, and they even bring in random men to their homes, mostly hobos, homeless people, and even male prostitutes. And when the new friend is well suited to their codes, then he's automatically accepted. But if he doesn't abide, well, let's just say that he will have to pay the price by playing a game which involves nursery rhymes, but at the end of the game, he gets killed. So this film is quite interesting in terms of the tone it had to offer, especially when I first watched the first couple of trailers, and it was just a lot of fun to witness, and it was just quite fun in terms of its usage of gallows humor. And if you know me, I'm an Anglophile, so when it comes to installments like this, it really does bring out the Anglophile in me when it comes to enjoying a lot of the dialogue and a lot of moments of how the story seems to move along. And it moves along really well. But I also realized that the original source material was darker than it was offered in the movie. In the original source material, let's just say that Mumsy is a lot more messed up, and Nanny is a lot older than portrayed in the film. And there are just a lot of messed up moments in the original play and an equally messed up ending. So in terms of the story, everything seems to be well balanced, from its usage of gallows humor to its really creepy atmosphere, which can be quite unsettling from time to time, even though these people appear to be very normal. And the fact that you have a set of individuals who have their own codes and their own punishments for people who break said codes is not only quite intriguing and fascinating in its own special way, but it's also quite fun in terms of how clever it is and in terms of how well the dialogue is written. So I'm not going to mince words here. The story is very well written, peppered with a lot of gallows humor and a lot of very interesting usage of the nursery rhymes, most especially oranges and lemons, which is basically played as a sort of execution game. And after the last chop for the last person, he ends up getting his head cut off. And I was mainly talking about Soldier, what happened to him. So, without spoiling too many details, the story is quite fun and it's just very enjoyable in its own special way, and it knows how to have a grand old time in terms of its overall execution. The cinematography was really well done. There were moments in terms of the camera shots where it tends to be quite claustrophobic, but it also establishes the really strange nature that the new friend has gotten himself into, mostly due to one particular accident that happened in the playground where his girlfriend was offed, mostly due to falling from a very big slide. But the cinematography really does serve its purpose in terms of capturing the claustrophobic atmosphere, but also that unsettling atmosphere in an otherwise normal setting. And it does its job really, really well, and it really defines itself wonderfully in terms of how everything is shot. Everything is shot fluidly and with such vivacity that it's hard to take your eyes off the screen. The music also deserves such special mention. The one noticeable feature about the music is that it basically establishes a high class family, which is why classical music is being used. And there are also some light, cheery beats, and there are also some moments where the music does tend to be erratic, but it also establishes its weird, quirky, and absolutely interesting nature in a way that establishes the entire plot of Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny and Girly. The music serves its purpose wonderfully, especially the main theme music, which is a combination of classical music saved for the aristocrats to using some nursery rhyme tunes, and even the ending credits was just so well done as it captures the erratic nature of the entire film. The music overall serves its purpose, and I really have to give high marks to Mr. Bernard Ebbinghaus for such a very fine score. The characters are actually quite interesting. Mumsy is basically the matriarch of the house. She is firm, yet seemingly kind. But don't let that quote-unquote kindness fool you. She has a certain presence on screen that will make you feel like you need to shit your pants every time she's on there. And her presence on screen is both terrifying considering her stature and considering the fact that she is the master of the house, and quite intriguing as you'd also love to know what makes this woman stand out in her own special way. So I'm not going to mince words here. Mumsy is quite a fascinating character, mostly due to her presence on screen, with her glowering glares, but at the same time laced with a certain sweetness that you can't help but feel mesmerized every time she's on screen. She basically takes full command of the situation, and you do not want to mess with her. Nanny is seemingly kind and caring, and also quite doting, but don't let that doting nature fool you. She's a lot more than that, especially when layer after layer is revealed after everything goes on in the story. She might seem sweet, but don't let that sweetness fool you. Sonny is basically, well, a combination of a troublemaker and someone who just loves to be quite mischievous, but at the same time, someone who is quite sweet. And He is quite an interesting character, mostly due to the fact that he is the only male in the group of four. And there are times that he does feel left out, and there are moments where he does feel a sense of envy, mostly due to the new friend. But Girly basically takes the cake when it comes to really interesting characters. She's almost comparable to Oscar Wilde's Salome, in which she is a teenager, but her ascent into womanhood is quite depraved and something that makes you feel terrified of just how creepy she is as a character. She may seem like your typical teenage girl, but don't let those initial impressions fool you. And yes, when it comes to both Sonny and Girly, don't let their childish antics fool you, because underneath those childish antics hides something a lot more sinister and even a lot more psychotic. Now, going to Girly, what makes her very fascinating is that type of transition into womanhood that she has, especially when she meets the new friend. She has a certain charm to her, but don't let that charm fool you, as it has that sense of menace to it, especially in the later acts, which I dare not spoil. But you have to see it for yourself as to see how terrifying this young lady can really be. But overall, out of the main four, she is the most fascinating character, mostly due to the fact that she is quite a very interesting case, and when she goes nuts, you do not want to mess with her. Let's just say that when she reaches her yandere levels, you do not want to mess with this chick at all. She might seem sweet on the outside, but don't let her sweetness fool you. She can hide something menacing that you do not want to mess with this young lady at all. New Friend is basically the catalyst as to what really makes this house go topsy-turvy. Initially, New Friend is a male prostitute who has his latest client, and he hooks up with her quite well. It's not until one day later at the playground that he manages to get himself into a very sticky situation where Sonny kills off his girlfriend by making her trip off a slide, and he gets framed for it. And he is constantly reminded that his girlfriend's corpse is basically going to show that he has to stay within the family for quite some time. And it's not until much later in the film does he get the moves on Mumsy, does he also know how to play his own game while following the rules of the house. And he manages to really stir up a storm with Mumsy, Nanny, and Girly, thus leaving Sonny almost out of the picture. And he really has a certain presence that really comes off as clever, and he is also quite resourceful, especially when it comes to situations that he got himself into. Soldier is basically the hobo, and he gets axed off in the first part of the film after a game of oranges and lemons. The girlfriend is basically the chick. Number 5 is basically the one who is about to get executed, and the zookeeper is basically the one who scolds Girly and Sonny for their mischievous pranks. So overall, the characters are very entertaining in their own special way, but Girly steals their thunder mostly due to the fact that she is a force of nature in her own special way, all laced up into juvenile adolescence and a prettiness that she initially has, but don't let that initial prettiness fool you. The acting is very well done. Ursula Howells has recently become one of my most favorite British actresses of all time. She gives Mumsy this presence on screen, commanding, demanding, and it just demands a lot of respect. She dominates her scenes with elegance, but also a hint of venom, which makes her character come alive, which should be no surprise as she has been very well known for portraying a lot of upper-class English ladies helped with her gravelly, plummy voice, and she's also very well known for her elegant presence, which has also garnered her a lot of projects in film and television. Pat Haywood as Nanny was just very entertaining. It should come off as no surprise that Pat Haywood specializes in a lot of motherly roles, and she really knows how to give Nanny her sweet, doting nature, but also laced it with a little bit of mischief. She was also very well known for portraying the nurse in the Franco Zeffirelli film version of Romeo and Juliet, and she was lauded for that role as well. In this role, I thought she did her absolute best in capturing Nanny's sweet yet mischievous nature, but one that's laced with a little bit of menace, wrapped in a nice pink bow. Howard Trevor as Sonny manages to combine Sonny's innocence, mischievousness, and his love for the thrill. And he does his role really, really well in terms of how he managed to make him come alive as a character. Vanessa Howard was the absolute star as Girly. It's no wonder why this film was released in the United States as Girly, because she is basically one of the focal points of the entire story, and she has this certain presence on screen that might seem quite sweet at first glance, but once she gets into her yandere mode, you could definitely tell that she means business. She really knows how to teeter-totter with Girly's innocent personality to her more psychotic nature, and she does it with such fine abandon. And it's no wonder why this has become one of her most famous roles of all time. She managed to be very professional in terms of how she was able to make Girly come alive, and even though she quit the acting scene in her mid-20s, she's still remembered fondly in this role in particular, mostly due to the fact that she managed to really find the line between childhood innocence and absolute psychosis. And she handles her role with such pristine and an odd sense of charm that I was completely mesmerized with her performance. Yes, there are some people who do feel that Vanessa Howard's acting is a little bit on the hammy side, but whether she comes off as hammy or not, she's still a very fine actress in terms of how she portrayed Girly. She managed to juxtapose between sweetness and absolute fiery psychosis, and she did it with such great flair. Michael Bryant was also wonderful as New Friend. Yes, he may not look like a Hollywood hunk, but he manages to have a presence on screen which is so commanding, which is also helped with his superb baritone voice, which sounds very smooth and has that fine dark chocolate texture, which is rich and creamy, that he manages to utter certain lines of dialogue with such declamation and such awe that I was completely blown away at his presence on screen. Robert Swan does do a good job in terms of Soldier's drunken nature. The gorgeous yet ill-fated Imogen Hassel did a very wonderful job in terms of portraying the girlfriend's saucy nature. Hugh Armstrong does a very fine job as number 5, even though he didn't have anything to say. And we even get the treat of having the great Michael Ripper, who is a very well-known British character actor appearing in a lot of horror films, make a cameo as the zookeeper. So overall, the acting was very well done, with the absolute standouts, at least in my opinion, being Ursula Howells, Pat Haywood, Michael Bryant, and last but not least, Vanessa Howard. These 4 were the absolute standouts in terms of how they managed to pull their characters off. And let's just say that they've also become my favorite actors to look out for, especially when it comes to the films that they've starred in. So overall, Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny and Girly was a rollickingly fun ride. Yes, even though the characters might not be fully fleshed out, there are still a lot of great moments of quotability and just a lot of fun being peppered throughout this film to make it lively, energetic, and very interesting in its own special way. With that said, I give this film a well deserved 4 out of 5 stars. Despite some minor issues, it is still a very worthwhile watch. Mostly because you get some very superb acting from Ursula Howells, Pat Haywood, Vanessa Howard, and Michael Bryant, and everyone just seems to do a very fine job. But it's those four that really stood out. And the story was just really fun and it never left me bored. Instead, it left me pleased and I had a lot of fun with this entire film. And for those of you who've seen it, did you really love this film? Did you not like it at all? Did you feel in the middle with this film in particular? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in next Friday where I review Un ballo in maschera from the Deutsche Oper Berlin with a completely different cast. So until then, good night everybody and happy early Thanksgiving.